friends, how are you guys doing? So I was thinking about how much I love to read books, and I thought it might be time to share something with you, which is something we usually wait until the very end of the year to do. This is a book called Dinosaurs Before Dark, and it's part of a series. So a series of books is a group of books that is written by the same author, and they have the same characters. So our book, Waiting is Not Easy, is also a series because it's written by Mo Willems and it has Piggy and Gerald in it. And there are, I think, 50 different books that are about Piggy and Gerald. And it even says at the very top, an elephant and piggy book. But these books are chapter books. And I think that some of you are ready to listen to a chapter book. Chapter books are different than the stories we usually read because they have very few pictures and they have a lot more words. We also have to think and remember what happens from one chapter to the next. So in this book, there are lots of different pages and there are what are called chapters, which are sections of the book. And I have lots and lots of these books that Mrs. Sharp and Mrs. Overmeyer have lent to me so that we can read them together. So I'm going to read 2 chapters a day, and we will then read another 2 chapters the next day, and we'll have to remember what happened in the story. So if you guys want to listen, you guys are welcome to join me. I'm going to start with the first one in the series. This is Magic Treehouse number 1, Dinosaurs Before Dark. This one was written by Mary Pope Osborne. She's the author. So I want you to think, what will this book be about? It might be about dinosaurs. It might be about a dream. We'll have to read and see. Let's see what happens in Dinosaurs Before Dark. In chapter books, a lot of times you'll find what's called a table of contents. And this is a page at the beginning of the book that tells you which chapters are in this book. So this chapter book has 10 chapters. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and they all have their very own titles. And then on this page, you'll see another list of numbers. And this list of numbers is the page number on which each chapter begins. So I'm going to go to chapter number 1, Into the Woods, which starts on page number 1. Oh, and there's a picture to get started. So look at that picture and think about it as I read. Chapter 1, Into the Woods. "Help! A monster!" said Annie. "Yeah, sure," said Jack. "A real monster in Frog Creek, Pennsylvania." "Run, Jack!" said Annie. She raced up the road. Oh, brother, this is what he got for spending time with his 7-year-old sister. Annie loved pretend stuff, but Jack was 8.5 and he liked real things. "Watch out, Jack! The monster's coming! Race you!" "No, thanks," said Jack. Annie raced alone into the woods. Jack looked at the sky. The sun was about to set. "Come on, Annie, it's time to go home." But Annie had disappeared. Jack waited. No Annie. "Annie!" he shouted. "Jack! Jack! Come here!" "Ugh!" Jack groaned. "This had better be good," he said. Jack left the road and headed into the woods. The trees were lit with a golden late afternoon light. "Come here!" called Annie. There she was, standing under a tall oak tree. "Look!" she said. She was pointing at a rope ladder. So I'm going to stop for a second. I want you to think. So we're talking about these 2 characters, Jack and Annie. Jack is the older brother and Annie is the younger sister. And so far, Annie has run off into the woods. It's almost dark outside. The sun is setting, and they just found a tree with a rope ladder. What could be up that tree? Think for a second. A rope ladder. What could that lead to? Oh, it could lead to a tree house. What else could it lead to? Something magical? Oh my goodness, you guys have such good ideas. Oh, that would be a good idea too. Okay, let's find out what happens next. Look, she said, pointing to a rope ladder. The longest rope ladder Jack had ever seen. Wow, he whispered. The ladder went all the way up to the top of the tree. There, at the top, was a tree house. It was tucked between two branches. That must be the highest tree house in the world, said Annie. Who built it? Asked Jack. I've never seen it before. I don't know, but I'm going up, said Annie. No, we don't know who it belongs to, responded Jack. Just for a teeny minute, said Annie, and she started up the ladder. Annie, come back! She kept climbing. Jack sighed. Annie, it's almost dark. We have to go home. Annie disappeared inside the treehouse. Annie! Jack waited a moment. He was about to call again when Annie poked her head out of the treehouse window. Books! She shouted. What? It's filled with books! Oh, man! Jack loved books. He pushed his glasses into place. He gripped the sides of the rope ladder, and up he went. And there's another picture here, and it's a picture of the treehouse. That is the end of chapter 1. So I want you to think in your mind, can you picture what Jack and Annie are doing? I love reading chapter books because I get to use my imagination and think about where they are, what kind of trees are around them, what the sky might look like, even what they're wearing. So I want you to keep thinking and using your imagination as I read chapter number 2. Here's chapter 2. Look at all those words. It says, the monster. Jack crawled through a hole in the treehouse floor. Wow, the treehouse was filled with books. Books everywhere. Very old books with dusty covers. New books with shiny bright covers. Look, you can see far, far away, said Annie as she was peering out of the treehouse window. Jack looked out the window with her. Down below were the tops of the other trees. In the distance, he saw the Frog Creek Library, the elementary school, the park. Annie pointed in the other direction. There's our house, she said. Sure enough, there was their white wooden house with a green porch. Are you guys picturing a white house with a green porch? That's what I'm seeing in my mind too. Next door was their neighbor's black dog, Henry. He looked very tiny. Hi, Henry, shouted Annie. Shh, said Jack. We're not even supposed to be up here. He glanced around the treehouse again. I wonder who owns all of these books, he said. He noticed bookmarks were sticking out of many of them. I like this one, said Annie, and she held up a book with a castle on the cover. Here's a book about Pennsylvania, said Jack. Pennsylvania is where they live. Like we live in Williamston, Michigan. Some of us live in other places. But they live in Pennsylvania, which is a state that is a little ways away from Michigan. Here's a book about Pennsylvania, said Jack. He turned the page to the bookmark. Hey, there's a picture of Frog Creek in here, said Jack. It's a picture of these woods. Why is that important? You're right. They live in a town called Frog Creek, just like our town is called Williamston or Charlotte or Barranquilla. They live in a place called Frog Creek, and Jack just found a book with Frog Creek in it. Oh my goodness. And it's a picture of these woods, he says. "Ah, here's a book for you," said Annie. She held up a book about dinosaurs. A blue silk bookmark was sticking out of it. "Let me see." Jack set down his backpack and grabbed the book from her. "You look at that one, and I'll look at the one about castles," said Annie. "No, we better not," said Jack. "We don't know who these books belong to." I'm wondering, if any of you were to find a magical treehouse hidden in the woods, what would you do? Thumbs up if you would go inside and check it out. Thumbs down if you would walk away. I would probably walk away. I would not be brave enough to go into someone else's treehouse, but I tell you what, my sister, Miss Murray, she would have a thumbs up. And my husband, Mr. Jarman, he would have a thumbs up. But I'm not brave enough to go in. Okay, where were we? There are a lot of words on these pages. Oh yes, Annie was reading a book about castles, and Jack said, no, we don't need to do that. We don't know who they belong to. But even as he said this, Jack opened the dinosaur book to where the bookmark was. He couldn't help himself. He turned to a picture of an ancient flying reptile, a Pteranodon. He touched the huge bat-like wings. "Wow," whispered Jack. "I wish I could see a Pteranodon for real." Jack studied the picture of the odd-looking creature soaring through the sky. Soaring is another word for flying. "Ah!" screamed Annie. "What?" said Jack. "A monster!" Annie cried, and she pointed to the treehouse window. "Stop pretending, Annie," said Jack. "No, really," said Annie. Jack looked out the window. A giant creature was gliding above the treetops. Gliding is another word for flying. What do you think this creature is? Whisper it. I think so too. The giant creature was gliding above the treetops. He had a long, weird crest on the back of his head. That's something coming out of the top of his head. Like birds might have a crest, which are some feathers, but dinosaurs might have bony crests that are attached to their head. He had a skinny beak and huge bat-like wings. It was a real live Pteranodon. The creature curved through the sky. He was coming straight toward the treehouse. He looked like a glider plane. The wind began to blow. The leaves trembled. That means they shook. Suddenly, the creature soared up high into the sky. Jack nearly fell out the window trying to see it. The wind picked up. It was whistling now. The treehouse started to spin. "What's happening?" cried Jack. "Get down!" shouted Annie. And here's a picture of Jack in the window and the Pteranodon soaring or flying through the air. Annie pulled him back from the window. The treehouse was spinning faster and faster. Jack squeezed his eyes shut and he held on to Annie. Then everything was still, absolutely still. Jack opened his eyes. Sunlight slanted through the window. There was Annie, the books, his backpack. The treehouse was still high up in an oak tree, but it wasn't the same oak tree. And you won't believe it, my friends, that's the end of chapter 2. So I'm going to put my bookmark in, which is very fancy today. It's an extra tissue. And I'm going to stick that right in here and close the book so that I know when we read again tomorrow, I will open my book up to that page. Oh my goodness, my friends. I wonder what happened when this treehouse was spinning around. I wonder if the Pteranodon had picked them up. I wonder if that maybe they're dreaming. What do you think happened? I want you to think about it, and we will revisit it tomorrow and find out what happens next. I'll see you guys tomorrow.